Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I am still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me over there today from Volquest.com, Matt Ray. Matt, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I'm great, Jason. I'm glad to finally get to sit down with you and talk a little recruiting, a little Tennessee football.
Little Tennessee football, little Tennessee recruiting. It was a big weekend with a lot of recruits. How many total were in the building with 2025, 6, and 7, right?
Well over 150. I don't know that there's an exact total to be known right yet, but well over 150 kids. Just a massive weekend, back-to-back weekends for Tennessee, really.
So how does that work for you? I mean, behind the scenes, like with that many kids coming in, like do you have to, like, do you and Austin split it up in terms of who we're going to talk to? Is it a little overwhelming where you're like, hey, Heupel and staff, let's calm it down a little bit. This is a lot for me to keep up with this weekend.
Yeah, it's a lot. You just kind of have to roll with the punches on a weekend like that. You try to reach out to guys ahead of time, just to get a feel for, are you going to be here? What's the plan? What do things look like for you after the visit? That way you can get in touch with them. You try to kind of set things up. And you want to get as much information and the instant reaction as you can. So it's important early to have a good relationship with some of these guys that are coming to campus. So, it flows a little bit more freely. But there's some guys that are just going to make it in that you most likely haven't talked to before. So you have to, create new relationships, do those things. It's a lot, but we try to, just roll with the punches and split it up and go about it as we can.
Who do you have the best rapport with the 2026 class? Who do you feel like the best coming into that Tennessee's targeting here?
Yeah, I would say not necessarily targeting, but committed already. Obviously, Faison Brandon. When you have someone like Faison Brandon that's been to campus now double-digit times as a junior in high school, we've been talking to him dating back to when he was first here in June of 2023. So a guy like that pretty well. You get to know a family pretty well. Leo Delaney, Samari Matthews are guys that, when Austin and I did a little tour of North Carolina in February, you had already seen them a time or two on campus before for camps or whatever that might be. And then, you've seen them on game day visits, and then, you go to their high school and see them, talk to them. Yeah, that builds a pretty strong rapport. So obviously both of those guys were here this weekend. And continue to have good rapport with them. They're just two exceptional young men on and off the football field. They're always greeting you with a smile and excited to kind of see you coming, which is not always the case in the recruiting process. Not everybody wants to just talk recruiting, with somebody 24/7, but those guys, always seem to welcome the conversation.
Who do you think they moved the needle with the most in the 2026 class? Because 2025 is we're wrapping up here, and I have one in particular that I'm going to ask you about. But who in 2026 do you think they moved the needle with the most this weekend?
Man, those two guys that I just mentioned, obviously Leo and Samari. I think this visit for them was, again, they've been here a lot, but this visit for them was so different. You've got Samari calling it a bucket list experience. You've got Leo calling it a once in a lifetime experience. I think this weekend really resonated with those guys. A lot of the things that they've been told from the Tennessee staff lined up, and then you add, the environment in. You beat Alabama. You get a chance to storm the field and see the goalposts come down. Those things I think were pretty important to both of those guys this weekend. Obviously, move the needle with a guy like Tyson Bacon, right? He committed right after the game. Brandon Anderson, you really moved the needle with him last weekend. He had an idea in mind that he was going to commit to the staff when he came back this weekend. And then, obviously a little bit more of a cherry on top with everything that went on. But, he had an idea that, that was the direction his recruitment was headed going into the weekend after watching Tennessee beat Florida in overtime. You had a good weekend with a lot of guys. I mean, everybody that comes out of a weekend like that's typically always going to be saying really good things, right? I mean, most of these visits, these big time programs are set up so you're going to have a good time. But when you get an experience like what you did at Tennessee, we frequently talk about 2022 and how that opened the door in so many recruitments for the Vols. Mike Matthews being one especially. They've really become a serious contender for him after that visit. Tennessee already had more well-established relationships because you've got such a tenure program right now under Josh Heupel. But, I think, again, you move the needle for some of these guys. Of Rodney Colton, the South Carolina linebacker commitment that's been to campus now on back-to-back weekends. He's, been excited to take a deeper look at Tennessee, and then, everything lines up 2 weekends in a row. I think for Tennessee, you just things couldn't have gone better the last 2 weekends, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any final big 2025 recruits to know down the stretch here over the next 2 months that Tennessee fans should keep an eye on in particular?
Yeah, obviously it starts with Isaiah Campbell, right? I mean, one of 4 official visitors to campus this weekend, top 35 prospect in the On3 rankings, a really elite defensive lineman, just a guy that Tennessee never wanted to let ride off into the sunset after he committed to Clemson, last December. They continue to recruit him. They continue to do things the right way, never just pushed it, too much, and it's paid off. Now, still a ways to go. There's still, some runway left there. Will he take a North Carolina official visit? He's a kid that's a little bit of a homebody. But North Carolina is a program that's got some struggles right now. What direction is, that program going? A lot of things line up for him at Tennessee. So he's obviously one to, keep an eye on. And Clemson's not, going to just let him decommit and stop recruiting him. They're going to continue to swing there too. So kind of a 3-team race there right now for him, with some others trying to be involved. But I feel like that's the core group that it comes down to. And then, Tennessee's obviously going to continue to reach out and talk to guys that they have relationships with, try to get guys back to campus. They'd like to add a couple of different linebackers if they could. Austin Howard on campus this weekend for an official visit. It feels like that recruitment's going to come down to Tennessee and Vanderbilt in the end. And Vanderbilt's had momentum. Obviously they had him committed at one point before he flipped to Mississippi State. And then, they've never gone away, and they have some good momentum from the product that they put on the field right now. He's set to be back there this weekend. His visit to Tennessee went really well, but we'll see if they can kill some of that momentum this weekend and kind of where things go as he looks to make a decision sometime in November. And then Tennessee just continues to reach out to guys and keep the phone line open with guys. And I think the month of November will be interesting for Tennessee to see who shows up on campus that's maybe committed elsewhere, and wants to take a look at potentially staying closer to home or going to a program that's at least a little bit more on stable footing right now. So I think when you look at Kentucky, a night game for what should be another really good environment, Tennessee will have a chance to maybe get some of those guys to campus that, they've been able to stay in communication with, that committed elsewhere over the summer or there early in the fall. So we'll see. I don't. The 2025 class is really close to being done, but it feels like they would add, the right pieces, potentially, the right defensive back, a right linebacker or two if it worked out, and then it doesn't feel like any names have popped up along the offensive line to this point. That's obviously after losing Douglas Utu to Oregon, a position they would love to add at, but it just doesn't feel like there's any traction there yet. But, you never say never at this point, especially in the recruiting game with the way this season's shaking out.
And when you look at Campbell, because that's like you said, I don't think maybe like ball fans don't realize how high up he really is. Like Isaiah Campbell would be a huge addition, a late addition for Tennessee on the defensive line. But I guess I'm curious, and from your vantage point, what flipped from him to go to kind of get Tennessee back into this as a long term? Because we don't see many of these kind of guys for Clemson, and I'm kind of surprised that Clemson's still in it. Like the back and forth where they're like, taking other visits once you commit to Clemson, that they would jump back into this one. That'd be kind of awkward. I've always thought that was kind of awkward if you recommit to a place you've already decommitted from. But I guess that is part one of my question. And part two is like, where do you think he fits on Rodney Garner's defensive line? Is he an interior guy? Is he a strong side defensive end? Do they see him more as a Leo? What is Isaiah Campbell at the next level?
They see him more as that strong side defensive end that can kick inside and play, different techniques in pass rush situations. He's really long. He's really versatile, gets up the field really well with a lot of twitch. So they see him being able to do multiple different things, during his time, but he would primarily probably serve as a strong side defensive end. Yeah, and, I think for Isaiah Campbell, it's really just the way Tennessee was pretty genuine in his recruitment. If you listen to him talk, if you listen to how he approaches the process, he's very thought out. He's very thorough in everything. He's a culture type kid, and Tennessee and Clemson, I think, both have very unique cultures, very different cultures, in my opinion, but unique to say the least. And, he committed to Clemson in December. He had only been to Tennessee once at that point, hadn't taken a lot of other visits elsewhere. And Tennessee just kind of let him know early on, in the winter, that we're not going to go away. We want to keep recruiting you. You're one of the top guys, if not the top guy on our board. And, through Rodney Garner, through Coach Chop, Lavorne Harbin, they were able to just continue to build a genuine connection with him and his family. It felt like at a couple of different times Tennessee was going to get Isaiah Campbell back to campus. But again, as you mentioned with Clemson, the no-visit policy and those types of things, they were able to kind of kill that. And I think as the process went on more and more for him, I think he realized, I committed in December. Clemson's a great spot. He still, again, has a lot of love for Clemson. They have a lot of love for him, but I think he wanted to do his due diligence in that piece of the process. And I think that's kind of what just led him to opening things up and saying, I've at least got to get out on the road and see Tennessee and maybe, nearby North Carolina.
Interesting. I just feel like Tennessee is the worst thing to happen to Clemson's recruiting over the last 4 years. It's just what Tennessee just going to North Carolina. I mean, just there's so much talent in the state, and Tennessee's just doing such a good job here in the last couple of years and going forward, obviously, with David and Faison over the next two classes. But switching gears here a little bit, I'm curious because you watched a lot of Boo Carter at the high school level, and his senior year at Bradley Central, he was awesome, and he's the lone true freshman starter for Tennessee this season, and obviously has played exceptionally well and stepped in even more so in the last few weeks for Kitchen Harrison at that star spot, getting a lot of snaps on a really, really good Tennessee defense. I wrote about today of just they've given up, I think, three 30-plus yard scrimmage plays, 1 40-plus yard scrimmage play. It's both best in college football right now. And part of that is just Boo Carter on the back end, Will Brooks, walk-on redshirt senior, and that was like the biggest question: how would Tennessee's secondary with so many starters hold up? And you just haven't really noticed a drop-off, and you can make the case the secondary is better than it's ever been at Tennessee, which I don't think a lot of people would have predicted before the year. But Boo Carter, to me, I'm really curious as someone who watched him at the prep level to now. Like, has he been about what you expected as a plug-and-play guy? Because we hear plug-and-play a lot on the offensive line, and you hear it with David Sanders, and a lot of Vol fans have questions about, like, him. Is he going to be a starter right away? Boo Carter just kind of was like this summer, and all you guys at Volquest were like, I mean, I think he is a plug-and-play guy. Like, we want to see it, and I think he is ready. What did you see at the prep level that made you think that he would be really good for Tennessee right away?
Yeah, so, I mean, just the short area, the ability to do what he does inside of the box is just something I think that's so unique to him that makes him have that ability to be a plug and play guy. And the fact that Tennessee really doesn't have that, and they haven't had that in some time, and he erases a lot of things. There was a little slip screen against Florida, where they worked somebody back inside late in that game, and if he catches that football and Boo Carter doesn't make that tackle, it's at least a first down, if not a touchdown. And, Boo Carter races as a 2-yard gain. Basically because of the way that the guy fell. Could have easily, have been a loss. But, I just think for him, just the ability to have some of the natural instincts that he does, there's just so many things with Boo Carter that you can't coach, I feel like. And, I think for the longest time in his recruitment, everybody would see what he would do with the ball in his hands. You would see the punt returns, you would see the offensive stats, the things that he was doing at Bradley Central. It's like, he's got to play wide receiver. He's got to do this. You've got to get him looks. Yeah, he's really dynamic with the ball in his hands. But the thing that you kind of continued to hear, around Tennessee was how he can just put guys in a box because of how much ability he has. All those things that he's doing, that lateral quickness to leave guys in the dust, all that translates over to the defensive side of the football. And one, it's something that Tennessee doesn't have, but two, it's something that just a lot of defenders don't have. So it made a lot of sense for him to be a plug-and-play guy, and Tennessee started getting him work early on, and he continues to live up to a lot of the hype, in my opinion.
Switching gears here a little bit, Georga MacIntyre. He was like the Vol fans, at the generals' quarters, were all they're on George watch constantly. The Brentwood Academy offense and what happened last year with their record, and then like just where his rankings are going to be. What have you seen from George this fall now that the high school season is well underway and we're almost done here with the regular season? What has been different that you've seen from Georga MacIntyre on tape this year versus last year? And what has he got better at? What have you seen that's changed from a year-to-year basis from junior to senior year for George?
Well, I've seen an offense that has settled more, right? I mean, it wasn't pretty week one. They lost to CPA there. It wasn't necessarily what anybody at Brentwood Academy wanted it to be, but it started to settle more and more and more. And that offense is playing with more of a rhythm, more of a pace. They're still under center at times, but they're dropping back. They're letting George do different things. And for me, I saw George game one last year, or maybe game two. It was early in the year that I saw George. And then I saw him at the end of the year. And it was a difference in the fact he was just so beat up. Both games, he made plays, but he ran for his life, specifically against McCallie. But, he had to still make plays outside of the pocket and do those types of things. I think year over year, just for George, the ability to still extend plays, be more of a natural athlete, have more command of an offense that's settled in. He looks like the Georga MacIntyre that had all the hype coming out of his sophomore year. Protection started to be a little bit better at times. Brentwood's gotten healthier at some spots. They're still missing some guys, but I think overall for George, it's just continued progression, continuing to be able to read defenses, get the ball out of his hand quickly. He makes some, go watch his midseason highlight film. He makes some really, really unique throws, to guys at Brentwood that I think only he can make. He has a really high level of processing. George could be a basketball player at the college level. He understands spacing really well. Makes those throws, and sometimes he just has to be that athlete. And I think we've had a chance to see more of that from him this year as things have continued to evolve at Brentwood. But ceiling's really high for Georga MacIntyre. You're talking about a guy that the frame is only going to improve. He's going to be able to add more weight. And as he adds more weight, he's going to be able to throw the ball further. There's going to be more velocity on the football. He's going to be able to do more in the run game. So I think you're just starting to see a guy that has a high ceiling start to scratch some of it more and more as the senior year goes on.
What's the biggest difference between him, Jake, Nico, and Faison? What skill set have you seen that makes George a unique quarterback prospect in Heupel's offense?
That's a really good question. I think, again, a lot of the spacing side of things from the basketball piece. Now, Jake played basketball as well, and Jake was a good basketball player as well. I think the spacing, the understanding, just more so of what athletes are going to do, how they're going to react to what he does, to a pump fake, to whatever. I think probably that's really one of the things that makes him unique is the ability to understand that and kind of what he's doing outside the pocket. I think with Nico, obviously he has the ability to make any throw at any level. And you kind of see he gets himself in trouble with that at times. This week, the ugly interception there after he came back from injury was because he was trying to make a throw that probably only a couple of other quarterbacks are even confident enough to try to make, But I think with George, it's a lot of the spacing and understanding just how he can do different things with a football based on that and having that understanding at such an early age. And it's something you want all quarterbacks to develop into, right?
David Sanders, does he feel like a plug and play guy immediately next year when you look at his measurables and size and how he's playing this year? Is your expectation that it would not shock you week one that he's a starter at left or right tackle? And which one do you think he's more comfortable with at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's so tough to come in, I think, along the offensive line and do those things, but it would not shock me to see David Sanders be a guy that comes in and plays very meaningful snaps for Tennessee early on. I think kind of where Tennessee's at and kind of how we've seen them do things, it wouldn't surprise me to see him start out on the right side with Lance Hurd at the left side, but you never know. How does Lance Hurd, what does the offseason look like for Lance Hurd? And how does he, continue to adjust to left tackle? We saw Tennessee take Darnell Wright and move him to right tackle. It worked out pretty well. So we'll see. I think David Sanders is equipped to play both of those tackles. He continues to add to his frame and just become more and more impressive. I think back to the first time that I saw David Sanders in person, which was in June of 2023 at a camp, and it was like, man, he has all of these fundamentals. He has all of this technique. Where does the frame go? And the frame is getting there, and it's only going to improve as he gets to Tennessee. So I think that's something that, the Tennessee staff very excited about.
Final two here for you, Matt. What do you think is more likely? Because I think it's interesting that Tennessee looking to add a couple linebackers. When you start looking at that room potentially next year, I'm like, that's gonna be a crowded room, very quickly for Tennessee. But you also look at running back because you have Justin Baker still, who's been a long time commit, the Buford kid, but you haven't really had another running back in that room. And both position groups are new with Darrell Sims at running backs coach and William Inge at linebackers coach. So we're still learning who they're going to prioritize and where they're going to go, and they're still getting acclimated, obviously, in this area and this footprint and recruiting for this offense and defense. But which way do you think is more likely? Do you think we see one more linebacker in this class in 2025, or do you think it's more likely we get one more running back to pair with Baker in the 2025 class, which as it stands right now?
That's a good question. Man, that's tough. I would lean linebacker right now just because Tennessee's been able to get a guy like Austin Howard to campus. They've been able to continue to have dialogue with some different guys that are maybe committed elsewhere. So I think overall, you've got more traction to add a linebacker right now. But, by November, that could certainly change. And by November, if things continue to go the right way, you could look at adding one to each. So I think overall, I would lean linebacker right now. I think Tennessee has continued to do a nice job there. I think if I was a running back and I had the chance to play in this offense right now, I think I would certainly be picking the phone up and making a call or two, given the fact that Dylan Sampson's headed to the league. You have Justin Baker, who's in the class, but that room's still not going to be that crowded. Tennessee's shown at times, especially in 2023 and in 2022 at different times, they will play three running backs.
Yeah.
So I think that's something they certainly want to do. Obviously, Cam Seldon dinged up, and Peyton Lewis dealt with injury, to kind of start his career once he got here. So you're maybe not able to get him as far on. But I think if Cam Seldon doesn't deal with injury, you see Tennessee play three running backs more consistently. So I think by the end of November, you could potentially be looking at it and say, oh, Tennessee's got a chance to add both. But today, kind of where we sit on October 22nd, I would say, linebacker would be the one I would lean to.
I like it. Final thing here, and we'll get you out of here, Matt. It's early, but is 2026, based on who they're looking at, who they're getting in the boat, who they're in really good shape with, here in late 2024, does the 2026 class have more upside to finish better than 2025 based on who they're targeting? Which way do you lean right now?
Man, that's a good question. That's a good question. 2026 has a lot of momentum right now. Tennessee's done a really good job. They've got a chance to finish really strong in 2025 too, so I don't want to take anything away from that class. It'd probably be close to a push, but I think 2026 has a lot of potential. So when you have a guy like Faison already committed, you're knocking off some of your early top targets. I think Brandon Anderson over time is going to only improve his rating. Carson Steve's already a 4-star tight end, and you're in with really established with some of the guys that I've already mentioned. I think you have a chance to add a very dynamic running back in the class, with some of the guys that Darrell Sims has established early relationships with, like a Savion Hyder, an Amari Latimer, a Jalen McGill. I think 2026 has really good potential. I'm not going to say that they're going to, it's going to be better than 25, but I think Tennessee's done a really nice job, and the last 2 weeks have been huge for the Vols.
I love it. Matt, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Volquest.com this week?
And we've got a lot. We have a lot on the site right now. Continued recruiting coverage, double-digit recruiting interviews still to come throughout the week. Brent Hubbs, Eric Kane, a lot of breakdown of different stats. First glance look at Kentucky. Obviously an important bye week. Basketball starting to pick up a little bit more as we inch closer to the season. Eric Kane is in Nashville, I believe, at some point for baseball this week.
Okay.
I think they have something going on out there for baseball. So it's kind of starting to be crossover time. At least between football and basketball, we're springing a little baseball. And so a lot of exciting stuff. So, come over, chat with us, and we'd be excited to have you.
I love it. Go subscribe. Check out Volquest.com today and keep up with Matt on the Trail Tidbits podcast on Volquest, the Volquest podcast as well. It's a great listen each and every week, and keep up with all the recruiting nuggets from Matt throughout the week over there at Volquest as well. Matt, thank you so much for making the time. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Chase. I appreciate you.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.